I worked for DEM, and I was a summer water quality intern, and I did bathing beach testing and shellfish growing area testing. And the guy who was kind of my supervisor said to me, the office for DEM is right outside the door from the Woonasquatucket River. He said, "This is the Woonasquatucket River. It's really dirty."
See, in '94, it was pretty, the river was filled with a lot of debris. I think about Dunigian Park, there was 150 shopping carts that were pulled out of a very small section of the river. So walking by, you could see a refrigerator poking out of the river, an oil tank. It was pretty depressing.
First of all, it was paved over downtown. Nobody even knew it existed. It was like, what did they say? It was the widest bridge in the country.
Guinness Book Record.
Right, yeah. Exactly. In the world, right. It was a Guinness Book of World Records, exactly. And nobody knew it existed. It was dirty, it was disgusting.
Well, the river was the economic engine for Providence during the Industrial Revolution.
It was a center for the textile industry. There's a very steep drop from the top of the watershed down to the river at the bottom, so it made it perfect for adding dams and getting a lot of power from that. So there were tons of textile mills and many, many dams along this river. And basically it was used for power and for dumping waste.
We worked together and decided that we were going to work on revitalization of this river in Oneyville. People basically were surprised, shocked, and told us that we were crazy in gentle terms.
The program started about equity. It was really, look at Oneyville. It was at the time the most impoverished section in Providence. So the focus became, let's look at the river as this catalyst for change to really restore land and the river as a way to make improvements in the neighborhood. We
interviewed residents from the neighborhood who said nothing good ever happens in Oneyville and anything you do will be destroyed.
Nobody was committed to the Woonasquatucket River. It was just like, okay, how can we just hush this river up?
And we interviewed officials who said anything you do in the neighborhood is going to be destroyed. So we had a consensus that this was going to be a very difficult task. Not that anybody didn't want us to try.
How it started was Jane really went out and started meeting the community.
The way we started was to try to get as much support and get as many different people involved as possible. And when we told people we were working on a project in Oneyville, they would just sort of roll their eyes. And then we would say, come out and look. And we would bring them out, for instance, to this park, which was totally abandoned. The neighborhood abandoned it. No one used it. And we walked along the river and we walked near the dam, and people suddenly realized in the middle of the most distressed neighborhood in Providence, you had the feeling of walking in the woods in Vermont. They realized that there was potential. And so we were given the go-ahead to try with the really strong assurances that nobody was going to fund it.
And then we sort of pitched the idea of, hey, what about this greenway? Folks started to see, well, if we kind of take the space that's been abandoned and, a rubble heap, which is not a safe place for kids to play, what if we turn it into something amazing? Maybe now we can create this community vision of a greenway.
As the executive director, I am responsible for running the organization, making sure that our vision is on target, but really for restoration of the river. So kind of like, our organization is meant to be the voice of the river and the people who use it and depend on it and the animals. Really it's what's good for the river. First of all, there's no fish passage because, well, we're starting to get there. But the dams start pretty close up in Providence. There's not much of a run for where the fish can come and spawn. Second, all the waste that's been dumped in there for over 140 years has really taken a toll. So the sediments, the earth under the river, are really full of nasty things that you wouldn't want to come into contact with.
In water cleanups, so we're removing a lot of debris, working on fish ladders.
Because really we're trying to teach the fish that this is a good place to come and spawn. It was really actually very exciting when I got here because I didn't even get a chance to breathe. It was like, okay, we're doing the grand opening of our first fish ladder. So it was a huge press event. We had Senator Whitehouse, we had Senator Rhode there. We had dignitaries that actually flew in from all over the country because this was like the first major partnership fish urban restoration project that anybody'd seen.
And welcome to this historic occasion, the first step in the restoration of the Woonasquatucket River as a spawning and nursery habitat for ocean-going herring and shad. This is the first such restoration project on an urban river in Rhode Island. Until now, it has been 140 years since these fish have been able to bypass this spot on this river. So that's something to celebrate.
When we talk about cooperative conservation, you folks are an example for the rest of the nation, and boy, I thank you so much for that.
And the other things we were doing were anything to bring people into the parks. Denigium Park was a mess. It was broken glass, needles, just.
This park was basically abandoned. There was very little equipment in the park, nothing was maintained, and the neighborhood didn't use the park. It was sort of seen as no man's land, it was gang territory, it was places where illegal activities took place. We had one of our first cleanups along the river in the park, and we pulled out 150 shopping carts and 3 tons of tires.
Marino Park was closed, that's now reopened. We did another playground bill there and it's kind of back in action. You know, just eventually they came around and we just started to run all these events, do some cleanups, get people involved in the neighborhood, work with artists to do park improvement projects.
One side is going to be a community bulletin board where people can post notices about local events, that sort of thing. We can put up things about cleanups and bike rides and so on. And the other side is going to have a map of the Woonasquatucket River Greenway or the bike path and the parks all along here.
Through the River Greenway project, the Watershed Council encourages all of us to play an active role in revitalizing the city and its natural resources. What better way to bring together a neighborhood than to build a safe place for our children to play and learn.
We ran these crash and bash trips classes at the Oneyville Boys and Girls. We would throw canoes and kayaks in a pool and just teach basic skills. And then we brought the kids out to the river. And again, you couldn't come up with a better way to share the vision of the river. I think the kids saw the river. You couldn't even see it back then. It's like, what river? You know, the hidden river, we used to call it. And then to get a kid in the river and experiencing, you know, canoeing and paddling, and you're seeing amazing wildlife. I mean, 2 weeks ago we went in the river with kids from Nickerson Community Center. There was, you know, a painted turtle. There were fish, great blue heron, mallard ducks in a little tiny stretch of the river, and kids were blown away.
It really allowed me to have a bigger picture of what's possible in the world. I mean, I never 20 years ago would have imagined that anyone would have tried to restore fish passage on this river. Never, never. I never would have imagined that anybody would have tried to restore the Greenway and build the park systems around here. I mean, we all thought it was just like a lost cause and that's the way it is. But because of that work that was done, I really feel like, okay, you know what? Miracles can happen. And I think we actually could restore this river to the point where people could come into contact with it and not have to worry about it.
I have to tell you a story. One of the first things we did was we had a river festival, and we were on a street in Oneyville Square where there was easy access to the river. And we decided to have a Greenway festival. A lot of people were helping us out. And the day before the festival, we went along the river and we cut down all the knotweed. And Joe Bear from Paddle Providence arrived with his canoes. And people from the neighborhood came to the festival and they saw the canoes and they looked at us and said, "Where did you get the river?"